Good evening, everybody. I'm Dustin Seaton, the president of Arkansans for Gifted and Talented Education, otherwise known as AGATE. I'm also the GT specialist at the Northwest Arkansas Education Service Co-op. And you're in for a treat tonight. We've been doing AGATE webinars for the last 2 years, and I'm happy to say that I believe, counting them up, that this is our 30th webinar that we've done in over 2 years. We wanted to provide a service for our members since we have largely been meeting virtually and wanting to still continuing to push the professional development opportunities for our members across the state of Arkansas. And we learned that the Zoom webinar feature enables us to connect with all sorts of people, parents, students, educators, because we are Arkansans for Gifted and Talented Education. We're not just a teacher organization. So we encourage you to join AGATE if you have not done so already. You can check out our website at giftedarkansas.org. We have, in addition to the member benefits of webinars like the one you're about to watch tonight, we have scholarship opportunities for those interested in getting their endorsement in gifted ed. We have an annual conference, which next year will be held in Little Rock during the legislative session, February the 22nd through the 24th, 2023. But then we also offer a variety of other opportunities for educational opportunities for students, parents, and just community members in general. So again, I encourage you to check out our website at giftedarkansas.org. But I also want to stop and just say very quickly, I know you're all across Arkansas, but would you please join me in welcoming tonight's head moderator and host, Jennifer Thomas, because Ms. Thomas, when I asked her to do this, about almost 2 years ago, I don't think we both realized what we were undertaking. There's been, as I said, this is our 30th webinar. That's over an hour long. You can see a whole list of them on our website of a wide variety, but the time that it takes to recruit, market, and then just organize the logistics of all these webinars has taken a lot of time. And so I personally, as president, want to thank Jennifer Thomas as the committee chair for our enrichment committee for all of the hard work that she's done. And with that said, I want to turn it over to you, Ms. Thomas, to introduce tonight's keynote speaker.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. I appreciate that. And I really enjoyed serving in this capacity. So we are not going to delay it any further. We have a special treat, Miss Laura West, and she is a Hot Springs Gifted and Talented Coordinator for GT. If you don't know, Gifted and Talented Coordinators carry a bunch of roles. As she just mentioned, she was doing testing for AP, and I'm sure that she's having to arrange different competitions. So when you say Gifted and Talented Coordinators, a lot of other things under there, but she's also National Board Certified. And tonight she will be discussing how cool traveling can be to gain insight about history and culture. And was sharing this information with her students, with teachers, and with her district, so that it's not just that you go and get that PD because you went and traveled somewhere and keep it to yourself. She has shared this years and years with AGATE participants, people in her district, just letting everybody know how they can learn from traveling. So we're going to hear from her tonight about where she's been and how these professional development offerings can enable educators to focus on enriching their content that they present to their students. So this is a great way to kind of spice up your teaching life a little bit, get to see some new things and energize yourself in this profession and have some positive student outcomes because of it. So we would love for you just to welcome her as she comes and take notes, make connections, ask questions in the chat, use the Q&A feature. Welcome, Miss West.
Hello. Hello, I'm Laura West. Like she said, I work with the Hot Springs School District. I am the Gifted and Talented Coordinator as well as the AP Coordinator. We are in the middle of AP testing, so there's a lot going on, as I'm sure you are doing that too. I've been a teacher. I started out not with a degree at all in education. So this came kind of as a second career. So I did history for a while. That's really a passion of mine. Love being a history teacher. And so a lot of the travel pictures that you're going to see did relate to content in the history classroom, but I've been the GT coordinator now for 4 years in Hot Springs. Okay, so first check out the FedEx logo. Everyone has seen those trucks go by. And so check out the logo. and then look at this arrow right here. Okay. So once you've seen that arrow, you can never go back to not seeing it. So that's the same thing with travel. So FedEx does this. They say the arrow is moving you forward. They strive for perfection. They're moving your package forward. And I feel the same way. Once you have been somewhere, your teaching is not the same. So you may be a great teacher and you're doing it to the best of your ability. But once you go somewhere and experience that, your teaching really is transformed. So you're not going to teach it the same way again because you're not the same person again. So just like with that FedEx logo, once you've done this, you're just not the same person. Can't unsee it. So different summer programs, there are a lot of different ones out there. So it can be small. It can be just a couple days. The shortest one I've done was 2 days. And the longest one I've done was 6 weeks. And so you may be thinking about your personal situation like, oh, there's no way, like I can't be gone from my family for 6 weeks, but don't worry, because there are some that are shorter. There's some that are inside the United States. There's some outside the United States. So there really is something for everybody. So summer programs, again, 2 days to 6 weeks, they do count as professional development. A lot of times they don't say that right up front, but now that I've been doing a couple, even if they don't say they're going to, I go ahead and make up a letter myself and be like, hey, could you sign this? And they're like, oh, okay, because I'm counting that as my PD days. Some of them give you a set stipend, like they'll pay you a certain amount of money, and then you buy things on your own. So you could buy your airfare, you could pay for your food, your hotel. But most of the time, they cover everything on their end. Still paid for free, but sometimes you do the legwork, sometimes they do the legwork. So it just depends on what kind of program that you're doing. Of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So you have to do your part. One time, my very first teacher program, I got a little notice from FedEx, ironically, that I had to go pick up a box. And so I went to FedEx and he said, well, are you going to bring your car around? And I was like, for what? And he said, well, the box is 42 pounds. So it was a huge box full of all of this reading. And I thought, I can't read all that. But really, once I read the letter, it was like, you have to read one chapter here and one chapter here. And then you got to keep all those books, which I then used in my classroom. And they also want you to do something on the end. So they're not just giving you this free trip. You have to earn it. So sometimes they'll ask you to develop a lesson plan, which we're doing that every day anyway. So, they want you to do that and share it maybe with some colleagues. Sometimes they'll ask you to keep a journal, just so you'll remember some of the stuff that you learned. And then definitely, like Jennifer Thomas said, they definitely want you to share the information. So they're not investing, just for the fun of it. Like they are investing in you with the hopes of better outcome. You're sharing that with teachers, you're sharing that with staff, with colleagues. And then a lot of times, I have never done it because I already have a master's degree, but you can pay extra and count a lot of the programs as college credit. And so that's an option too, if you're looking for graduate school. So when you go to these programs, they are beyond belief, like the greatest thing you've ever done, because they put all this money into it and they really give you like a great bang for your buck. So they are the top professors, top scholars. You're meeting with like the top people in different countries. I remember when I was in Poland, we met with the director of education. And at that time, that was our Arnie Duncan. And I was thinking, I couldn't go to DC and meet with the director of education. And here he's meeting with us because we're teachers from other countries. So you're doing these amazing things. They're the chaperones. For once, you get to be the kid. You get to be the learner, for that lifelong learning. And so, they want you to have fun. They want you to connect with people. One of the great things is also, I remember we were in DC at the National Archives and it was hot. You've been to DC, you know how hot it is. And the line was stretched like all the way around this side of the building, like 2 sides were the line. And I felt so sorry for those people because our bus pulled up and they stopped the line. We just all walked in because we had an appointment. But it's just nice to be able to do that. And so this man right here, you can see in the yellow hat, when I was in Poland, our tour guides are different in other countries. They have to take all these tests and really have to be like a scholar in their field. So the lady that's on the left in the black shirt, she was my tour guide. And she saw this other guy was waving and called him over and introduced him. And his dad was on Schindler's List. So if you've seen the movie, Oscar Schindler, saved all these different Jews and said that they worked for his company and saved their lives. And this man's dad was one of the Schindler Jews. And again, that's not someone I would ever know in real life, but he stopped and talked to us and, just like, we really owe him our life. And this is what he did for my dad. And here's how many brothers and sisters I have now. And that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. You just don't get to meet those people, if you're there by yourself. Another program, if you guys use Civic Voices, if you don't, you should, because it's amazing. So this is Janice. I can't remember what her last name is, but if you've ever used like the Southern Poverty Law Center, anything about civil rights and the Children's March, she's in the video. So if you've ever watched it, this is Miss Janice, and she talks about what it was like, to march get arrested. I think she was 14 or 15 when she got arrested. And then this other speaker right here, this was former Senator Doug Jones. He was the one that prosecuted years later, like 40 years later, the 16th Street bombing, church bombers. So 40 years it took to finally get justice, for the children that were killed during the KKK bombing. And so he got to talk about, 40 years later, this is what happened. And here's how we gathered evidence, and just amazing things, again, that you wouldn't be able to do on your own. So here's kind of an overview of the different programs that I've done. So you can see I started back in 2008. I just started teaching in 2004. And then in 2008, started this program. And you can see there's a big variety. I've been to Russia, I've been to DC for lots of programs because it's amazing there. I've been to Germany, I've been to Duke, I've been to Poland, I've been to South Africa twice, but they're all with different programs. And again, some of them are very long, some of them are pretty short, but don't be scared to try because it's amazing and you get to go for some cool places. And all of this was free. And so this is not me paying for travel. This is someone investing in me as an educator to be able to pass on this knowledge. So here's some tips when you get ready to apply for a program. So you first check the requirements to see if it's grade level or subject level specific. The great thing about being in GT is we can fall under all those categories because we do teach math, we do teach creativity, we do teach science and literacy and all of those things. So since probably the last couple of years, I've even called and said, like, I don't see GT specifically listed on here. And they're like, oh, we've never thought about that. So you could apply just for GT under that label, or you could apply for anything else that you teach. So the first thing you need to know is apply for a lot of programs because you just need to get your foot in that door the first time. And then once you find like that application magic, you just write it over and over again. So probably since 2004 or 2008, I've been using the same version of the same application. Now, of course, I tweak it because I've been in different districts, but once you kind of have what you're looking for, it's not like you're reinventing the wheel, and applications are very similar. I'll show you that here in a second. So one of the things is you always play up your connection to others who've done that program. It's just nice to have someone that's already done it, maybe write a recommendation for you. Always call and ask a question. I am allergic to smoke. And so I always call and just be like, hey, I'm wondering about the accommodations and, what is the smoking level like? Because you want them to know and like remember your name, because then when they sit down as a committee to try to go over applications, they'll be like, oh, Laura West. Yeah, I remember talking to her on the phone. Now, does that always work? I don't know, but I have been very lucky. And that's just a tip that I would give you. I always write in the application that I play well with others, because if you know that about yourself and you're fun, you should definitely write that, because they don't want boring people there. And if you know that is something that is great about you, and y'all may know me and be thinking, no, she does not play well with others, but I can when I need to. So I always make some like kind of a joke in my writing and just be like, I want to be the student. I want you to be in control. And so again, I've gotten into a lot of programs, so maybe it works. Also, don't be offended if you don't get picked. So they want a really good demographic. So they want people from, large cities. They want people from small cities. They want people that have just been teaching a couple years. They want veterans. They want women. They want men. They want minorities. They want all of that. So the very thing that you are 1 year that you might not get in, that might be what they're looking for the next year. So you're not changing anything about yourself. They just want a really well-rounded program. So just by being you, you might not get in one year, but then the next year you are exactly what they're looking for. So in general, the applications are very similar. So especially if it's one out of the country, they do want to know about your international experience, not because they're judging you, because they do want some people that have just been, maybe never out of the country. And they do want some people that have been out of the country before that can kind of be helpers. So again, you're not lying about it. You're just writing what it is. So write about your experience. They want you to demonstrate need. So you are telling them, this is why you should pick me. A lot of times as teachers, we try to downplay our accomplishments, but this is the time to brag on yourself and just be like, hey, this is why I need to go. Maybe you're in a Title I school. Maybe your students have never traveled before. Maybe the place that you work doesn't have a lot of diversity. Maybe you don't work with a diverse staff. And so these are things saying like, you need to pick me and invest in me because ABC. A lot of times they'll ask you for a plan, which pretty much is going to change once you get to the other country. When I did my Fulbright to Poland, I had this whole plan of what I was going to do. And then when I got there, I was like, oh no, that's not realistic. And so I said, like, am I allowed to change? And they said, of course, because as you learn and grow, you think about your student needs. And so you can totally change what you want to do. Of course, you need to provide a resume or your CV, and then the letters of recommendation. Again, always try to get someone from the program. If you know someone, always try to get them to do your letter. So for example, I went to South Africa for 6 weeks with the program. And the very next year, 3 of my friends who had heard about it, they all applied. All 3 of them were wonderful. They could have all totally been an asset for the program. But one of them, I said, you need to let me do your recommendation. And so they knew me, the committee knew me because I had just spent 6 weeks with them. And I wrote, Jennifer is your girl. Like, you need to stop looking right now. You have to have Jennifer in this program. And here's why. Told a little bit about her. And out of my 3 friends, Jennifer's the one that got in. So it definitely helps if you know someone, have them do your recommendation. So some of the ways that I use this in my classroom. So these are different pictures from my travel, always current events. Kids need to know what's going on in the world. And so the first picture where it says get human, that was when I was in Berlin and I'm standing next to the Berlin Wall. And so the kids never understood, like, why didn't they just go over the top? Like they just couldn't get into your head. But everyone knows how tall Miss West is. And when you see me standing there and I'm not even close to the top, then they're like, oh, that's why they didn't go over the top. Besides, they would get shot too. But, they got to visualize that like, oh, now I see how tall the Berlin Wall is. The second picture is about Nelson Mandela and all different names for him. So he had like what his family called him and what, he was called as president. So a lot of kids have that same situation. Their parents call them one thing and they go by a different name at school. The bottom picture is at Auschwitz. I am so dumb. I had learned about Auschwitz. I had studied about Auschwitz. I never realized that this famous picture right here, where you can see the wall and the gate, was inside the camp. In my mind, this was like the outside looking in. And when we got there, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so dumb now. I had no idea this was inside. So again, that helped me as a teacher because now I can explain that too. This famous view is from inside the camp. And then the last picture, this is from Krakow, Poland. I don't know if you guys remember a couple of years ago, it's St. Mary's Church. But the Polish president and his entourage, they were flying to Russia to commemorate this mass slaughter during World War II. And their plane went down and like 100 of them were killed. So this was where the president's funeral was held. And I'd been there and these were pictures of St. Mary's Church. So they, I think it was CNN, one of the news networks, they actually live streamed the president's funeral. And so I pulled this up, and as we're studying, doing our class, we were watching the Polish funeral. Of course, we didn't understand it because it was in Polish, but the kids got to see that like Miss West was in that church, and now this president died. And so we're watching his funeral right there in that church where Miss West was. And so current events, I mean, you will pull out your pictures and use them in all sorts of ways. Fun fact, if you go during 4th of July, maybe, like we celebrate here, But if you're in another country during that time, they are just so amazed, like, this is your country's holiday. You know, we have to do something special for you. And we're like, yeah, we would have barbecued at home, but like they really go all out and they just want to make sure that like you remember your country on that day. So the bottom picture, this was a huge cake. We got invited to the embassy and we got to go to a party with the American ambassador to Poland at that time. And so just because we were Americans right there, they had that connection and they're like, come on, we need you to come, you know, to this big party. The cake was pretty good.
Laura, we have our first couple of questions.
Yes, because I will talk, so just stop me.
Where do you hear about all of these various opportunities? Is there a go-to resource? Okay.
Yep, I have a whole slide that explains exactly where to find them. Mm-hmm.
And then another question is, do you create videos or have you made a vlog before?
I have not. And even the lady from AMLE, which I'm going to get to in a minute, she has even asked me that. And she was like, you know, if you would just do this, we could channel it and use it for the AMLE is Association for Middle Level Education. So they have reached out and asked me to do it, but I am like horrible with technology and I would just screw it all up. So no, I have not. If I were a better person, I would do that, but I just haven't yet. So, okay. So when you go to these different places, a lot of times they make the connections with the universities. So this was at Nelson Mandela University. We had class there. So one of the first classes, I look out the window and I see monkeys for the first time. So I'm like, oh no, we got to stop. I was like, I've never seen monkeys in the wild. So like, I'll be right back. And the professor's like, let's just stop because everyone needs to go see the monkeys. So we go down, we look at them. Okay, by the end of the 6 weeks, I hated monkeys. I could kill all the monkeys because they are horrible, horrible creatures. They steal your food. They like lock you in houses. But the first time was magnificent. So it's really cool, you know, just to be somewhere else and see something you're not used to seeing. Another trip that I really recommend that, again, as a GT teacher or a history teacher, is called GERTA, or the TOP program. And they tell you right up front, this is a PR ship. We know you have to teach about World War I. We know you have to teach about World War II, but we are so much more. So they want you to come over and it's for 2 weeks. Again, all expenses paid, you know, and they take you around the country and say, look who we are now. And so I would definitely recommend this program. Again, I am going to tell you all about where to find these at the end, but just keep this one in your mind because it's amazing. So one of the things they do, again, they're trying to show you a good time. When I was on that Germany trip, we were about an hour outside of Cologne. And I had mentioned like, oh, when I was in high school, you know, we went there and at the top of like very, very top of the cathedral, it's like 550 steps up. And I just remembered in high school, it was so hard to climb. And so I was like, man, I wonder if I could do that again. And they're like, do you want to go? And I was like, well, it's an hour away. Like, we're not in that city. And they're like, no, we'll just buy tickets tomorrow for you. So our entire group of like 16 people, we all took the train an hour away to the city just to see if I could climb up those steps again. And so there I am, like at the top. So they really want to make sure, because they know that you're not from there. So they're going to try to accommodate you in any way they can. So this was just amazing that we got to go back and I climbed up those steps. I've been back a couple more times. I didn't climb them anymore because I figured 2 is enough. So this was in South Africa. Again, some of the institutes, short or long, there is some class time. So you can tell sometimes we are sitting there in class, but it's very interactive. So like maybe a speaker will come in and then you know, you do a reflection afterwards. So I'm hearing like, what did you think about the speaker? How are you going to use this in your class? You know, when you get all those ideas right there together. So that's amazing is that, you know, you are around these educators that also have the same drive that you do and the same interest that you do, and they can come up with some amazing stuff. And then of course you're contributing as well. Again, how dumb I am. So at the southern tip of Africa, that is where the 2 oceans come together. Very windy, very cool, big posters showing what kind of animals live in each ocean. And I was really wanting the waves to be like together, like where they're like fighting against each other when they meet, but no, it's just a plain ocean. So I was very sad about that. Okay, so when I presented this session at AMLE, Association for Middle Level Education, we got to go to the safari park. This is also your class. So just like we sat in that class and listened to a speaker, this also is part of your class. because you need to experience this. So I did my presentation. I think it was in Minneapolis, maybe. And then I got an email like the next day, and she was like, I'm the president of AMLE, and I went to your session, and I need you to write for my magazine. So I did do that. So this is probably my one and only time, well, second time that I got published. So I got to write for the magazine and kind of tell about, these programs and what you should do. So there's these great connections, because I did this, then something else comes of it. So you just put all that good karma out and you meet just these amazing people. Second, some other cool experiences. I don't know if you guys know about history in South Africa and apartheid. So the picture at the top of the arrow, you can see a young boy that has been murdered. So they had this, so it's called the Soweto Uprising. And so this little boy, 13 years old, was murdered. And you can see his sister is like in shock because her brother has just been killed. So then the bottom arrow, this is Miss Antoinette. So she came to the pizza place where we were eating dinner. We had our own little room, and she came and talked to us and told about like why they were marching and what happened when her brother was murdered and how she really had to live with that and how she had to stop being angry so that she could have a good life. And to hear that from someone that was there and that it was affected by apartheid. Of course, now when I teach about apartheid, I do guest speaking a lot at the school where I work now as the GT coordinator, but still with a heart for history. So I email the teachers and be like, do you need a guest speaker? Let me come in and talk. So now when I talk about apartheid, these are people that I can say, this is how she was affected. Also, you see the man with the skeletons, kind of the fossils. We went down, it's called the Cradle of Humankind, and it's where the oldest hominoid bones in the world were found. So we went down caving, and then we come out and there's this big sign, bones and stones. So I went over and peeked in and I was like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, oh, you can't come in here. This is off limits. And I was like, oh, I'm an American science teacher. And he's like, well, come on in then. So he lets me and my other colleague in. And I said, I promise we are not going to touch anything. So of course we go in and I said, oh, I just lied to you because I have to hold that fossil now. And, by then we were all good friends and he was handing us the fossils and we got to hold all of this stuff. And when we came out, our guide was way back at the beginning and he said, where have you been? Like everyone else came out of the cave like 30 minutes ago. And I was like, well, we were at Bones and Stones. And he was like, why? And I said, well, we went in and we got to go see the fossils. And he was like, no one is allowed in there. But again, they have such respect. And that's a very generalized statement. But in my experience, people have such respect for American teachers that you really are treated like royalty. And he said, no one has been allowed in that. Like in all the years I've worked here, no stranger has been allowed to go in there. And I'm like, until today. So just these experiences, again, you couldn't even pay for this and it's free. So food, you kind of have to get out of your comfort zone. So you get to eat at all different places. So on the top left, wherever the beautiful dessert is, you would think that would be amazing to taste, but it is not. As Americans, we put way too much sugar in everything. And so I was getting ready to take a bite of this and I was like, oh, they do not put sugar in things. So it did look pretty, but it was not tasty. The other one, you can see we're in a big cave eating. This is some worms with spaghetti sauce, like a tomato sauce. I did lie to my kids and tell them I ate this. I couldn't do it. It smelled like dirt. And so I got it like this close to my mouth and I was like, couldn't do it. But I do tell the kids that I ate it. And then sometimes you just need some KFC. So you're going to get a wide range of, places to eat that don't go with a preconceived notion that you just want things that are familiar. You need to be open-minded and take in all that the trip is about, because that's the whole point of being there. The bottom where you can see like the salad on top of the fish, I had actually ordered fried fish, and being from the South, that is not what my fried fish looks like. But again, I just was like, thank you, this is delicious, because it just wasn't what I was used to. Sometimes if you're staying at a service apartment, sometimes you stay at hotels, but then sometimes you stay at an apartment, like they'll rent a 4-bedroom apartment, you each have your own room, but then you're cooking. So you get to go to the grocery store and kind of live like a local, and buy your own food and cook it up there. For housing, sometimes you do have your own room. Sometimes you have to share a room. Down at the bottom where the pink curtains are, that is actually in a Russian dormitory. And I was there when Russia and Ukraine, the conflict started in 2014. So some Ukrainian refugees were actually there in the same dorm with us. They were terrified of us because with the propaganda going on, they were told that America is the one that had attacked instead of Russia. And so it was very awkward. And our leader had to go talk to them and say, like, these American teachers did not do anything to you. Like, please do not be scared of them. It was a very awkward situation. But you can tell I'm sharing a room there with someone. But then in other places, you know, it's 5-star accommodations and you have your own hotel room. So that's interesting as well. So here's some other different places that we've stayed, some of them nicer than others, but always very clean, always very safe. With travel, you could be traveling in a variety of ways. So of course, you're probably going to fly to get there. Sometimes they'll rent a bus. Like this is Mr. Richard. I'm going back to South Africa in June just for my personal vacation. And I'm going to call him when I'm there because I haven't seen him in so long. And we spent 6 weeks together. So I'm going to call Mr. Richard, get to hang out with him again. Sometimes you're in the back of a truck. We kept saying our insurance does not cover this. Like I've never ridden in the back of a truck in America, but we were riding down the road in the back of a truck. So some of the things I also do when I come back is to make those literacy connections. So again, like Kristen White, I know you're on here somewhere. Hello. She still teaches literacy. And so if you're going on this trip as a literacy teacher, there's so many connections you can make. So showing your pictures, you know, they can tell a story. You know, what is the narrative of this story? You could show photos and do the details. Like, what do you see? How is that different from where we live? Expository, you know, a lot of times I'll show a picture and we have to look at clues and try to guess where it is because, you know, you use your context clues again with literacy. And then I've done a lot of persuasive writing where they have to gather different photos about a country and then maybe write a brochure and try to convince people, you know, here's why you should come here. So there's lots of different literacy connections you can make. So check out this picture. This was in a World War II museum in Poland, I believe. And this was the very last room at the museum. And if you can't tell, there's fishing wire. And this is a huge room, probably about half as big as an American classroom. So they're all different shoes hanging with fishing wire. So just look at it for a second and think, what do you think is going on here? We had no idea. So we're just like, we kept looking for the little label to tell us what was going on in the room. And we walked all around, no label. So we get out, you know, that's the exit. This was the last room. And we're like, what was going on in there? And they're like, you're supposed to decide for yourself. So as teachers, we were thinking, well, I guess I will share my opinion because I'm the speaker and I can do that. We decided that it means like, don't aimlessly follow a leader because they could be leading you down the wrong path. But I always use this in my classroom now. And I don't even tell them it's about World War II. I just show them the picture and be like, what do you think it means? You know, and the kids, of course, come up with these great ideas, but that's kind of what we decided it meant to us. You know, don't follow someone blindly. You need to figure out on your own. Okay, so now you need to think about, so I always have my kids close their eyes. So take a minute and think about how many water faucets do you have in your house? So count the kitchen, count the bathroom, maybe count if you have one outside to wash your car. So think about how many faucets that you have in your house. So I do this with the kids. And then I let them know that this is a township in South Africa and there's 120,000 people. And in that township, they have 12 water faucets. 12 water faucets. So we think, how would your day be different if you did not have that water close to you? You know, if you had to walk, how would your day be different? Would you brush your teeth every day? How would you clean yourself in the morning, like hygiene? And so it's just a great conversation starter. Also, let me add, I had permission to take this photo. Do not ever take photos of people without asking. It's just rude. And so we had a conversation with these ladies and I said, I'm an American teacher. Do you care if I take your photo? And they're like, no, of course not. So just also know that, don't be that rude American, this getting up in people's faces, and it's not a good look. But it was very educational, and it gave my kids something to think about, like, how many do I have? How much water is too much water? And if you're interested in things like that as well, the United Nations has sustainable development goals, and there's all these different categories. You can tell there's 17 different categories. So for GT kids, they love to make real world connections. And so if you click on any of these, and you can just type in UN Sustainable Development Goals, there's going to be lessons there. There's going to be activities you can do. And it's all about making a difference. And again, for GT kids, they want to know why we're doing something. And so these are definite ways that, like, you can change the world with any of these goals. So one of the cool things I did on one of my programs, I was the Arkansas representative for the NEA, the National Education Association, Global Fellows. And so in 2018, we got together, we did a year-long PD, and then at the end, you have a trip, and we went to South Africa. That was the second time I went, but we actually wrote this book right here. And so it's about different lessons. So we kind of divided up in groups and, like, hey, what are you interested in? Oh, I'm really interested in water conservation. Okay, write some lesson plans, for water. Oh, this other group might be interested in education. Okay, write some lesson plans. So I think it's like $10 on Amazon right now, but it has all of these lessons that you can do, with your classroom. Also, I don't know if Brenda's on here from Malvern. Brenda is going to be this next year's representative from Arkansas. So 2 GT coordinators. So I'm from 2018. And then, of course, during COVID, things were closed down. But I believe she's going to South Africa or Brazil. I can't remember exactly. She may be going to Brazil. But they switch it up where you get a different trip. Some other things that you could use in your classroom. In South Africa, they're changing the names of a lot of streets. So maybe in the past, one name was appropriate, not so appropriate anymore. And so we've had really good discussions using these kind of photos about things that happen in the United States, because we know now different things are being changed with names. Statues are coming down in the South. So just to have kids talk about, what is appropriate at one time might not be appropriate anymore. So conversations like this, of course, with GT kids, amazing. Another thing I like to do is called observation station. And so I laminate photos and just hang them all up around the wall. Kids get a clipboard and a piece of paper that looks like this. And so they just walk around. I always put on some music, especially if it's from one time period, like to end a unit. I try to find some music from that time period. So the music's going and they've got a clipboard and they're just walking around the room and they write down what they know about the photo. If you are teaching a class for a grade, this is a perfect summative assessment because they're telling you what they have learned. They're writing, they're getting out their thoughts about what they know. And of course we tell them, like, let's say it's Abraham Lincoln. You're not going to say this end is Abraham Lincoln. You have to actually tell what you know about the photo. And it's amazing. The things kids come up with, it will amaze you. Also, sometimes you celebrate if there's something going on in another country. So like we have Martin Luther King Day here in January. So, it's a day on, not a day off, and that's where you volunteer. So in other countries, they have those same things. So we happen to be in South Africa on Nelson Mandela Day. And so there were 50 of us, one from each state. And so we all chose kind of where we wanted to volunteer that day. And so a lot of us went to this daycare and volunteered, and we played with the kids, and those are little aprons. Some people helped wash those aprons, but it also, when you're in another place, it kind of changes your mindset because 100% of the students at the daycare had AIDS. Whereas maybe in my job, I don't experience that. When you go to other places, things are very commonplace. So it's just different challenges. You need to make sure that those kids stay healthy. And so it's just a whole different set of things you don't even think about. Like this is something those teachers think about every day. And I have not had to think about that so much where I work. Okay, this is also, again, South Africa. This was the cell where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for 18 of his 27 years. So again, when I go to the cell, you can't go in, but you're standing right next to it. When I teach about apartheid next time, I can tell the kids, this is how big it is. I can show you pictures of exactly what it looked like. So that perspective, just like with the FedEx, once you've been there, things change. New Year's, when I went to Russia this last time, we celebrated New Year's in Red Square. That's something I would never have a chance to do any other time. So we were there in Red Square, the fireworks are going off. We actually were studying folklore then. And so we went to these remote villages and heard about songs and music and stories and helped document that, because just like in America, a lot of small towns are disappearing. And as the older generation dies off, we're losing a lot of that. And so we got to go and help preserve some culture and of course, see new things. So check out the bottom picture. So you can see there's guns, you can see there's weapons. This was actually in a school. So I think it was a high school, so maybe like 8th, 9th, 10th grade. The war took place in their backyard. So these kids are digging up items and bringing them to school, and they put them in this museum in their school. And so when we walked in, of course, we're like, oh my God, like guns at school, and they're like, well, you can touch anything you want. You can pick it up. So we were holding, of course, they're deactivated, but like we got to hold hand grenades and horseshoes and weapons, and we got to hold all of that stuff. Again, I have never held a World War II, gun before that was dug out of the ground by high school kids. They also, in case you didn't know, I did not either. So in America, we have like dog tags that soldiers wear around their neck. Before those were invented, they had capsules. So it was like a small capsule with a piece of paper inside with your name and rank and everything. And so the boys that we were interviewing, they found 4 sets of remains from German soldiers. So they had been in the war, World War II, they had marched into Russia, had died. And so these kids dug them up. So the bones were there and the little dog tags, which of course the kids then stopped touching it because they realized what it was. And they flew some scientists in. And so they actually were able to excavate the remains and take them back to Germany. I don't know what happened after that. So I don't know if they were able to identify who they were and get them back to their families. But that had just happened, I think, like 2 years before I was there. So these kids are doing this great work in their backyards, and we got to hold it all. If all of this sounds like way too far out of your wheelhouse, do not fear. There are many American programs that are right here. So if you enjoy teaching about Mount Vernon, it was super interesting. You actually get to stay on the grounds. I don't know if you've ever been there, but there's like Mount Vernon, and then kind of off to the side, there's actually like it's not a hotel, but maybe it's 30 rooms. And we each got to have our own room and we stayed there. So after the gates closed, of course, we couldn't go in the house. It was locked, but we just like walked all around the grounds. Like some people would get out at like midnight and just go wander around in the garden. And we just had free reign of the place for I think it was 6 days, 6 or 7 days. So don't be scared and think like, I've never been overseas, I can't do that. Start small, find something in Chicago, find something in DC. Just start out small. And then as you gain more confidence, maybe you would want to do some of those larger trips. Another thing I do is just use photos in many varied ways. So you can look at it and make comparisons like then and now. I also use this just as a get to know you. And it doesn't have to be this photo. This just happened to be one that I saw in DC. But we'll say like, just as a game to kind of introduce everybody, like my name's Laura and I see, some ruffles on George Washington's arm. And then the next person's like, oh yeah, I see that too. Well, my name is Stacy and I see blah, blah, blah. So it's really just about observation. This would be for younger kids, of course. The older kids could make more inferences, but just to see, and someone might point something out and you're like, oh, I never even noticed that. So you're saying your name, you're talking, just kind of gets the class talking, kind of a get to know you at the beginning. We're winding down, I promise. So as a teacher, we know that the world is getting smaller, everything is interconnected, and we want to do that for kids. We want them to see those connections and just how to make the world a better place, because whatever jobs they're going to have, they're going to be interacting with people from other cultures. So why not get them interested in and start thinking about that now? And even if you have some service projects, you could do those at the school level, the community level, beyond. So start working with your kids now, because their jobs are going to require them to learn how to work with other people. The final words, please do not be an idiot because there are those people on every program. You've got to remember that it's a group trip. This is not your vacation. Now, it's fun like a vacation, but you're there to learn. So don't sleep late in the morning when you knew you were supposed to be on the bus at 9 o'clock. Don't be rolling in at like 9:20, because now everyone else had to wait on you. Everyone else is mad at you because now maybe you even missed part of the time at the museum because they're waiting on you. Socialize with everyone. I'll just leave that at that. Don't hook up with people where the only two people are the person you're dating now. Even when you're married to someone else, there's always big scandals on these trips, but don't do that. Don't do that. Talk to everybody, try to learn what you can from other people, and then just appreciate the experience. You might not like what's for dinner one night, but don't sit there and verbalize how you can't stand what you're having for dinner. Just like eat a couple bites and then run and get a burger sometime later that night, because the world of travel is really small. One guy from Arizona, we have been to, I think, 6 different countries together. And we always joke that he's my summer husband and I'm his summer wife, just because we love traveling and we end up on these programs together. Luckily, we like each other, because if someone doesn't like you and they know you're not a good candidate, people talk, and you're not going to get invited back to stuff if you are not a good traveler and person. So here's just some testimonials on all different levels. So this is my friend Stephanie. She was former National Council for the Social Studies president. Again, these connections. I applied to be a trade reader. So you get like 300 books to read, and there's 14 people in the United States that do that. And then at the end of the year, National Council for the Social Studies releases a list, which I can include on this presentation, of books you need in your classroom, just amazing books. So my friend Stephanie was the president the year that I got picked out of 14 people in the United States. That is not a coincidence. We did not have a conversation about it, but I know that she had to help my application get pulled, and this was someone I traveled with back in like 2008. Also, like for art, when you go to these other countries, if that's your passion, check out the art in these other places. And then my friend Shannon, she came back and now she does a lot of that artwork in her art class. Like here, we're going to model Turkish tiles, and here's some wire animals. So use whatever you love, find those examples where you're visiting and then bring them back to your classroom. This is my friend Drenda, and she works at North Carolina State. She teaches teachers, and she talks about teachers are not rich, like we are not rich people. And there's some of the people that don't travel the most, people that go into education maybe don't have a lot of that extra money. So definitely take advantage of these trips where someone's paying you to go and learn, and then you're, of course, going to share it with everybody else. And then this is my friend Sam. He was in Switzerland for a while. He is now on lockdown in China. He has been for probably 5 weeks because they're having another COVID outbreak. So he's just keeping us updated on what's going on. But he really talked about how these tours help kids envision, just a larger world than they started with. So by you traveling and you imparting that with them, you're really just opening their world. So here's the question you were asking about, Destin. So one of the ways that I found out about programs now back in the old days, 2008, the first trip that I went on, I didn't even know these existed. And so when I got my very first trip and people were like, oh, when I was in Ecuador, and oh, when I was in so-and-so, and I was like, what are you talking about? So I would get a clipboard and I would sit next to everybody on the bus and I would write their name and I would have them list all the programs they went to. And then I would sit, the next day with someone else. We have obviously moved past that electronically. So now if you're on Facebook, go to this group. It's called Scholarships, Grants, and Summer Institutes for Teachers. And then I'm going to leave my email here too, like if you need help or references or anything. But when you get into the Facebook group, this is what it looks like. So there's all the different categories. Go to files. So when you go to files, it comes up all different content. You can see there's art, there's business, there's career. If you don't even want to be a teacher anymore, career changes for teachers. And then you could either print it off or look at it electronically, and it just lists all of these opportunities. So like if I find something, I go at Ken is the guy that runs it, and I'll just be like, hey, here's a link for a new one, and he'll add it to that program. There's also just like a running dialogue of like, hey, you guys, remember Mount Vernon deadlines coming up, so we just share new opportunities. And so this is now where I find out all of my stuff. So when you click into the file, this is how it looks. So it'll just have the title, and then it just has lots of different links, and you can just go through, and there's, like I said, like 300 programs. So there's something for everyone. There really is something for everyone. And remember, once you've seen it, just like with that FedEx arrow, once you have been there and experienced and seen it, you really will be transformed, and your teaching will be transformed as well. Ta-da! So Dustin, is there any questions? Or, I'm a talker, so.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I don't see any on Facebook yet. And just, I forgot to remind anybody, if you'd like to ask a question, you can use the chat button at the bottom, or there's a Q&A button or a box that you can type in questions. I did want to point out that Brenda Rush said that she is an Arkansas NEA Global Fellow this year. So thanks to you for letting her know about it. And she's going to Peru.
Peru. Okay. I don't know why I was thinking it was Brazil. Okay. So she's going to Peru. But again, I was a fellow. I really recommended her. She's wonderful. And I was like, you need to apply for this. Not saying, that I helped her with that, but just that knowledge of like someone that did it. And she's like, oh, I could do that too. And she's going to be wonderful. And that one, again, is a year-long PD. So you're interacting with these people for a year on webinars and, doing some study modules together. And then when you go out, when you finally get to travel with them, you're like, oh my gosh, I've been talking to you for a year. Before COVID, they actually flew us up to DC in October. So we had a 4-day week where we kind of got to meet at the beginning of the program. Then we spent all year together, and then we traveled together like in July. But because of COVID, I don't think Brenda got to do that.
No, and I appreciate you saying that. When I first started doing teacher travel trips, it was by attending conferences. And so I encourage y'all to attend the AGATE conference or any of the other middle level conference, high school level conference. I think it was the Arkansas Curriculum Conference, which isn't around anymore, that I attended and learned about some opportunities. But it literally is just networking and asking from other individuals. So with that said, Laura, would you have a recommendation of one that you would say, if there's someone watching here, this is the one I would highly recommend y'all applying for domestically?
I really have. Well, Mount Vernon was really good. I still have not gone to, there's like a Jamestown one. I just haven't done that yet. A lot of them are now defunct. So I think the one that I went to in Birmingham is gone. I think the Red Cross one, I did a week in DC. I don't even think I included that on there because it doesn't exist anymore. Really, none of the ones, like if you look at that sheet, I have not gone to a bad one yet. Like they really are great. Actually, I went with Brenda and then Kristen White, if she's on here too. I am not an outdoors person at all, but it was a free trip to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So we all flew last year for a week, and it's called American Leadership Wilderness Institute. And again, it was all free, and we stayed in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Everyone had their own, it was like one big cabin, but then you each had your own bedroom. They have a chef there, the food. I mean, we had asparagus, we had salmon, like it wasn't like burgers and fries. And we learned how to fly fish, and we went whitewater rafting, and we learned about like why, how you manage resources, like why is hunting okay in some areas for different populations? How do you keep the deer down? It was totally out of my comfort zone. Like I was not comfortable, but we laughed and everyone made fun of me because I'd never slept in a tent before, but we had so much fun. So even though that's not something I would ever do again, to do it one time, amazing. So yeah, check out that one. I think this year, the Jackson Hole Airport is closed down because they're revamping it. So they did have to close that program just for 1 year. Okay. But then if you are an outdoor person, or even if you're not, like you may want to look into that one. Any of the NEA programs are wonderful. National Education Association, the Humanities has great programs. There really are just great programs out there, and they want you. They want you to apply.
If the Gilder Lehrman Institute are still accepting applicants?
I don't know about the timeline, but yes, they do still have programs. That's the one I went to at Duke University. Mm-hmm. Okay, another tip: always read what you're applying to. I thought I was going to women in history. So flew out to Duke, opened the book the first day, and it was like a very intimate view of like privates. And I was like, whoa.
Oh no.
It was apparently about women history. And it was luckily, it was just like 4 days. I was like, this is not what I was expecting. Still learned a lot. But that was my one and only Gilder Lehrman, because that was my fault. That was on me. I did not read carefully. So, but I think it was also misleading because a couple other people are like, this is really bizarre. I was like, I know. But yes, they're amazing and they have great resources too.
Yeah, I've done a couple of them, and generally the applications and you might speak more to this. The application process in my experience, was always more in the later fall, and you would find out early
Yes.
Or late
In
winter, early
general,
spring. Okay.
Yeah, in general, applications come out around October, November, and then apply then. And usually the deadlines are around February, and then people find out maybe in like April, May.
Okay.
But there are some with rolling deadlines. Like I didn't apply for anything this year, but I know I need to get back on it for next year. But with
I'm
COVID,
glad-
like, again, didn't
I'm
want to
glad
take a
you
chance.
talked about cuisine too, because I was on a teacher trip with an educator who would not eat any of the native food and brought like a suitcase full of Pop-Tarts. And it was just so embarrassing as an American that we were eating this really unique cuisine and they were bringing like Pop-Tarts at dinner. Like,
Yes. Well, I knew on the South Africa trip. So we went to this one, I mean, obviously I love some dessert, like I love some food. And they brought out like this beautiful, like chocolate. It was like a little chocolate bar and it was like, all decorated. And the guy next to me, he took one bite and he was like, oh, I can't eat this. And I said, we will never be friends. I can already tell we're not going to be friends. But all he would eat was chicken for the whole trip. Like he wouldn't eat anything but chicken. And I love some chicken, but like every meal, like you're not going to try anything else. And that's all he would do. He would go, if KFC was there, he would go to KFC. But if he couldn't get to a KFC, like that's all he would order. And I just thought that's a shame, because you're really missing out.
well, on behalf of Agate, again, thank you, Laura. Let's at home, if you don't mind giving a silent applause, but we appreciate all your tips and insight. I was taking notes here. At sometimes I know we probably forgot something like your email address. Should we want to reach out to you again? Yes. We'll make sure we have that in the recording, but also hyperlinked or listed on our website, giftedarkansas.org. But again, thank you for giving us your time and your insight and your years of experience during all these teacher trips.
Okay, I'm reading in the notes. It says, are there ever opportunities to bring someone along? I don't know about a 7-year-old because during the day, like you are truly in class. I know sometimes they can say you can bring your families. So like maybe if you had a partner that would stay with the 7-year-old, but they definitely would not be allowed to come to class and do the activities during the day. Like once nighttime is over, then you would be able to do that. But some of them even say like, you cannot bring anyone because it's so intense and the day runs so long. So really it depends, but I would not bring a child where you could watch them. You would have to have someone else watch them.
Yeah, good question though too, because I know childcare, our family care in general is important.
Oh, sure.
We tried to butt up either the weekend before or the weekend after the events and just try to have an extended opportunity to spend whether it was mainly domestic, like New York City or DC, but
and that happens a lot because I know one of the last ones I did was to Belgium, and they all of a sudden like all these partners started arriving, like because our program, like let's say, ended on a Friday, so like Thursday night, all of a sudden like the hotel got so much busier because then people were gonna they brought their partners and families over, and then they were gonna have vacation. So yeah, so you could do that even if they couldn't be there during the actual program.
Well, you actually nailed it perfectly. It is 7 o'clock. We started right on time and we're going to end right on time. Thank you, everybody that joined us. Again, if you joined us late or if you wanted to find out for more information about Laura West, if you want to type in your email one more time in the chat, Laura, but we'll have this recording. It's on our Facebook page under Gifted Arkansas, facebook.com/Gifted Arkansas, or our website, giftedarkansas.com. So again, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Jennifer Thomas. This concludes our 30th Agate webinar.
I think I accidentally sent that as a direct message instead of to everyone. Hey, Jennifer, now you know my email. Okay, change that back to everybody.
Well, we appreciate you.
There we go.
Great job.
Okay, see you guys.